Thank you to Renew magazine for sponsoring a very different looking sustainable house day this year. My name is Catherine Macmillan and I'd like to tell you about the solar and battery system I installed on my house a year ago today. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I pay my deep respects to elders both past, present and emerging. So 5 years ago, I bought my house in Kinglake West. If you want to know where Kinglake West is, start in Melbourne and drive north. Just outside the city boundaries, turn right and go up the hill. Kinglake West is at the top. It sits at over 500 metres elevation, so it's a few degrees colder than Melbourne, which is sometimes a good thing. One of the reasons I chose to live here is because of the environment. It is surrounded pretty much on all sides by national park or state forest. The neighbours are pretty cool too. Another draw card to purchasing the property was to become more self-sustainable. The house already came with tanks and pumps as there is no reticulated water supply. I'm also currently working on creating an edible garden. It's a work in progress. But one thing I was fully dependent on was the grid for electricity. And living on the urban fringe, I soon found out that the grid was not very reliable and I'd be frequently left quite literally in the dark. Blackouts were frequent and would often last over 24 hours when they occurred. So what to do? I could continue on as I was doing and be miserable when the power went out, or I could do what most of my neighbours had done and buy a generator. A generator did not appeal to me. Firstly, there is the cost involved with setting it up, and unless you are spending big money, it will only be sufficient to power a few appliances. The fumes and noise are also another problem. The other issue is with our government. This is a bit concerning when you live in a bushfire-prone area. I felt the answer was to install solar with a battery. Of course, I wanted to go off grid, and although this is very appealing, a bit of research and the sensible thing seemed to be if you have ready access to the grid, you should use it. So I contacted a number of companies to look at a hybrid system. One company suggested I install 2.5 kilowatts of rooftop solar with no battery. The second told me I should forget batteries and just get a generator. And another suggested lead acid batteries. I might have walked away, but fortunately I found a company called Off Grid Energy Australia who actually listened to me and proposed some systems that would suit my needs. So eventually at the start of 2019, I decided to go ahead with a 7 kilowatt rooftop solar system with just over 15 kilowatt hours of storage. And so this proposal was submitted and dun-dun. My electricity distributor, AusNet, rejected the proposal as it used 11 kilowatts of combined solar and battery inverter, and their limit was 10 kilowatts. So I was back to the drawing board. What to do? My heart said, go off grid, the unicorn option, but still the same problems. Head said no. Another option was to install additional phases as the inverter limit applied per phase. But given each phase would need its own inverters, this would also end up being a very expensive option. I could reduce the size of my system, but I felt I'd still be spending a lot of money and not achieving what I set out to achieve. One option I spent a lot of time considering was a no permission to connect system. I could max out my roof with solar, but I would have no ability for export. And while the system could charge from the grid, the maximum rate meant I'd be struggling to power the house if the battery ran out. So in the end, it was decided on a DC coupled solar system to the battery, and that was installed a year ago, exactly to this day. So there are 38 panels on the roof, and they're in an east-west configuration, a total of 12.16 kilowatts. Now, 20 of the panels are AC coupled, and the remaining 18 are DC coupled directly to the battery. The BYD battery has 20.4 kilowatt hours of storage, 100% of which is usable, and the total inverter size is 10 kilowatts to keep AusNet happy. Now, unfortunately, I'm not a tech nerd, but this is how I believe the system works. Half of the solar is AC connected, and this power is sent firstly to the house. Now, if the house doesn't need all the electricity that's being produced, it's then sent to the battery. If the battery is full or it's charging at its maximum rate, the excess is sold to the grid. On the other side, the DC connected panels will directly charge the battery. Once the battery is full, the DC coupled panels will switch off. They'll produce no more. Once the sun goes down, the house will be powered from the battery. If the house is pulling more than 5 kilowatts, it's made up for by the grid. The battery can cope with higher for short periods, but it'll choose to use the grid after that. And if I want to, at any stage, I can charge the battery from the grid. Hope that makes sense, and I hope it's correct. So the system's now been installed for a year, so how's it performed? After a slight hiccup at installation with a tiny little wiring component that was quickly fixed, it has performed without fault and has not required any maintenance at all. In the warmer part of the year, my system has been self-sufficient and it's only drawn electricity from the grid for load management. So in the summer quarter, my electricity import was total 4 kilowatt hours over the 3 months. I also exported enough to pay for the daily grid connection fee and earn a little credit, which is sort of nice on the bill. Winter has been a little bit more of a challenge. So between May to August, I've needed to buy some electricity from the grid. As my goal has been to keep charging the battery in case of a blackout, I use my storm switch to charge overnight on off-peak electricity. Unfortunately, this means I have to guess how much solar will be produced the following day, and I'm not always successful with this. And another issue is the conversion from the AC grid to the DC battery and back to AC causes significant losses, so I end up buying more electricity than I can use. The monitoring that comes with the system has enabled me to keep track of electricity usage a lot better, which means I can use some electricity-hungry appliances a little bit more carefully. But despite all of this, my electricity usage has increased significantly over the last 12 months, and this is the reason why. The day after my panels were installed, this beast decided to run into my car. Now, the EMU ran off and the car was still drivable, but the insurance company wrote my car off. I decided it was fate, so I decided to replace my car with a plug-in hybrid, the Hyundai Ioniq. So it's making use of some cheap electricity to fuel my trip to work. But the main reason I installed my system was for blackout protection. And since it's been switched on, my house has been fully powered. I've not once had to reset my clocks. And this is despite a number of blackouts. In January, a pretty fierce storm came through. This is a photo of my road, how it looked like just after. And the power was out for around 40 hours. But my house had full power throughout. I was even able to charge my car. This made me very happy. So that is my battery and solar story. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you for listening. And thank you also to the sponsors of Sustainable House Day.